Welcome to the Obesity Matters Wellness Workshop, where we embark on an incredible journey together towards better health and wellness. Whether this is your first time or you have been with us since the very beginning, we are grateful you are here with us today. My name is Rachel. I'm the Vice Chair of Obesity Matters and your host for this year-long program. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Dayna Lee-Baggley, who's going to talk to us about the intersection of sleep and stress and wellness. In fact, today's session is titled From Stress to Rest, Wellness Unveiled. Welcome, Dayna.
Well, thanks everybody for having me here. What we're going to talk about again today is a bit about what is wellness and how do I get it, and some science-backed principles about that. So I'm a registered psychologist. I also do research at Dalhousie University and St. Mary's University. I've spent most of my career working on the medical, surgical, and cancer care units at the hospital. So working with people with chronic disease and life-threatening disease. We do research on behavior change, and not just behavior change for patients, but also behavior change for healthcare providers and what they can do to support chronic disease management. And we've now entered helping workplaces create healthier workspaces for people, for everybody, but also for people living with chronic disease. Okay, so Wellness 101. First question is, what is wellness? Which is an awesome question because when you think about it, actually, it's a little bit complicated. So, if we look up definition of it, it's a holistic concept that refers to a state of being in good health. And it involves a bunch of different things, right? That we have physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, environmental well-being. So it's not just the absence of illness, for example. The wellness industry comprises all kinds of things aimed at improving health and well-being. Fitness, nutrition, beauty, anti-aging, right? There's all kinds of players in this space. It's the global market is 4.5 trillion, and that's a significant growth from previous years. And so there's a lot of people in this space trying to help with wellness, right? Some of it is, helpful, and some of it is just stuff that people make up. And so we have lots of influencers and people like that, which often with very good intentions, but are really just giving you their personal experience, which may or may not have anything to do with your wellness and may or may not work for you. Here is like a scientific perspective. And what we're going to talk about today is how acceptance and commitment therapy would look at wellness. And so ACT is a third wave intervention. It is the next generation after CBT. So if you've heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, this is kind of the next generation of that. And so it incorporates a lot of things from CBT that work really well and then adds some new things in that are also helpful. And so from an ACT perspective, wellness would be having what you need to live a vibrant and meaningful life. So ACT is empirically supported. It's approved by a number of organizations and recommended throughout the world. It's also transdiagnostic, and so which means that we use it to treat all kinds of things. So we use it to treat things like OCD and psychosis, but we also use it to treat things like procrastination and parenting, right? So some of those are, mental health disorders that actually have diagnoses, but other things are just like life things that we all kind of struggle with. So again, it's well supported. There's over 1,000 randomly controlled trials demonstrating its effectiveness across a number of different conditions, issues, topics. And so that's why it's a really helpful model to use when we're thinking about how to think about wellness. So from an ACT perspective, wellness is not just defined by the absence of distress, but also how we can do things to be aligned with our values. And being aligned with our values is about how we create meaning and purpose in our lives. And so one of the things our culture really says is that somehow we're not supposed to feel bad. If you feel bad that there's something wrong with you, and if you just tried hard enough, you'd be able to get rid of it. But actually, all those difficult feelings are actually the ticket of admission to a meaningful life. You can't really do anything that is really important and matters without it coming along with and having the risk of difficult and yucky thoughts and feelings. And so they're two sides of the same coin. You can't have love without the potential of being hurt, right? Even really wonderful relationships will end at some point. And so if you're not willing to accept that potential pain that comes from losing somebody you love, then you can't have love. They're two sides of the same coin. And so another way of thinking about this is if your life was a painting, is it full of color, right? And having a painting full of color doesn't mean it's just the sunshine and rainbows, right? Again, we have to be willing to experience difficult things to be able to have a fully lived life. And so part of what ACT does is try to provide people with skills to be able to deal with those difficulties in life. They are hard. It does feel yucky, right? It is difficult to make space for those yucky thoughts and feelings. And so to provide skills that, again, have been backed up by a ton of research to help us do these meaningful things that can be difficult. So here's a different perspective on that. Here is like a scientific perspective. And what we're going to talk about today is how acceptance and commitment therapy would look at wellness. So I always think it's helpful to understand how our brains work. I just refer to this part of our brain as our survival mind, responsible for things like emotions, automatic thoughts, learning, memory, appetite regulation. The other relevant part of our brains would be our prefrontal cortex, and this is where executive functioning comes from. And that's things like decision-making, planning, problem solving. This part of our brain controls our behavior. So this is technically where willpower or self-control comes from. And unlike our survival mind that's always working, our frontal lobe is like a battery. And so we can wear out that battery of self-control. And that's in part why binge eating is more likely to happen in the evenings compared to the mornings, because in part, we've used up that battery of self-control, but our survival brain is still there suggesting we eat sugary, salty, fatty foods that, again, we live in an environment that are easy to get to. So we're going to talk again about some science-backed tips about things that you can do. So our first one is charge your battery, right? So a recharging activity is something that makes you feel more energetic at the end than when you started. So common ones for most people are things like sleep, eating healthy foods, staying hydrated, physical activity, being in nature, and social connection. But there's also individual differences. So for an extrovert, being with other people might be recharging. For an introvert, that might be draining. This is not the same thing as a healthy habit, right? So, if going for a walk makes you feel angry and irritated, then it's not a recharging activity, even if it's a healthy habit. But when we think about, some of them are, and sometimes that is like a useful way of thinking about them. So, when a crisis comes across my desk, my inbox explodes because something bad has happened or some crisis is happening. The first thing I think of is, when was the last time I ate? Because if I don't have a charged frontal lobe, I'm probably not going to make good decisions, right? And then I want to make sure I eat something really good for my brain. So our brains take up 3% of our body weight, but 23% of the glucose in our system, meaning the food you put into your body is going to have a disproportionate impact on how your brain is working. If you give it lots of processed foods, it just doesn't work as well. It's like crappy fuel going into your body. If you want to think clearly, if you want to have energy, if you want to do things that matter to you, right? Eating like whole foods, not processed foods will make your brain work better. Not just for the future, not just for some long, awaited, health benefit in the future. It's going to help you today. It's going to help you now think more clearly. Okay, so I think it's like Sleep Awareness Month or Sleep Something Month. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about sleep as a recharging activity. So there are a lot of implications that happen when we don't get enough sleep. We used to think, sort of sometimes sleep is portrayed as like doing nothing, this like wasted time. You can sleep when you're dead kind of idea, except it's not, it's actually a super active process. Your body and mind are doing a ton of things while you sleep, which will help you function better. Right. So lack of sleep is associated with all kinds of risks of chronic disease, accidents, and injury. Staying up, I think it's like more than 18 hours is the equivalent of being like 0.8 drunk in blood alcohol level. Those might not be the exact numbers, but it's something close to that. But basically, if you stay up for too long, it is like being drunk. That's the effect it has on humans. right? So cognitive functioning, again, your frontal lobe battery does not work well when it doesn't get enough sleep. It is necessary to recharge that battery. Sleep is, again, an active process that actually removes like toxins from your brain, repairs things in your body and mind. It helps consolidate memories, right? And so there's all kinds of studies showing it impacts planning, behavioral control, decision making, reaction time, emotional regulation, learning, memory. And so it is a very major way for us to recharge our battery. It has impacts on our immune system, inflammatory responses, hunger drives. We know that when people don't get enough sleep, that it will directly impact your weight. It impacts your weight on a number of different ways. One, it reduces your cognitive functioning. So you don't have as much self-control. That battery is less, so you can't make choices as well. It also increases your hunger drives. When you have more cortisol, for example, which is a stress hormone, is more difficult to lose weight. But it increases the drive for hunger. It reduces our ability to control our behavior, and then also tends to make us like moodier, which then again we're more likely to want to reach for something that's going to make us feel good in the short run. Right. So sleep has a really big impact on all of these things. And often when people think about weight management or healthy behaviors, particularly around weight, we get really caught up in like diet and exercise. But actually improving your sleep would probably have a dramatic impact on your health overall and your weight. If you're trying to change habits, whether that's about sleep or other things, again, there are some tips about that we can use from science to improve the likelihood of making sustained change. So here are some of the tips. The first one is pick a behavioral goal. People often pick goals that are thought or feeling goals. I want to feel motivated to go to the gym. I want to enjoy working out. I want to enjoy eating salad for lunch. Those are all things governed by your survival brain. So don't pick something that you don't actually have control over. If you pick a behavior, that is governed by your frontal lobe. You don't have unlimited power to control your behavior, but way more than your thoughts or feelings. And so behavior is something that someone else can see you do. Pick a 90% goal. So this means pick a goal that you're 90% sure that you can accomplish. If not, make it something smaller. Do it less frequently, less intense, less often, because you want to be successful at it. Success breeds success. When you feel like you're succeeding at something, you want to keep going. If you feel like you're failing, you want to quit. It's just human nature. This includes when you're trying to and I'm not saying that people should or shouldn't do this, but when people are counting their calories or trying to monitor how much they're eating, if you set a target that is really low, that you often exceed, that's actually going to be demoralizing. So pick a target that actually you are 90% sure you can hit on a regular basis. Make that something successful. And then you can, change that goal over time as you get more used to it. Pick a do instead goal. So if I were to tell you to not think about pink elephants, you would suddenly notice yourself thinking about pink elephants. And this is a well-established effect in psychology called the thought suppression effect, that the more you try to not think about something, the more you think about it. And so we often set don't do goals, especially around weight management. I'm going to stop eating bread. I'm going to stop eating chocolate. I'm going to stop eating processed foods. All you're doing is creating pink elephants. And so think about adding healthy things in instead of taking unhealthy things out. What are you going to do instead of eating chocolate? What are you going to do instead of eating processed foods? Think about, adding vegetables or whole foods before you start worrying about what you're going to take out. Track your progress. If you are picking 90% goals, it's going to feel like very small increments, and that's exactly the way it's supposed to work. So you want to track your progress so you can realize that you are actually making progress over time. And then lastly, plan for setbacks. So managing weight and any health behavior is actually a fairly complicated thing. And we live in a world that's not at all supportive of those habits. And so life's going to happen. You will fall off the wagon. You will stop doing your habits. The actual skill there isn't about avoiding falling off. It's how quickly can you get back on. People often think about sticking to my habits means that I'm doing the habit all the time and I never stop. That's not realistic. Life is going to get in your way, right? The more important skill is, can you start up again after you stop? If you are able to start up again quickly after you stop, so you get sick and you don't go to the gym, right? That's probably a good choice. So if I, can't go to the gym for a week because I'm sick, How quickly can I get back on after I'm feeling better? Does it take me, till January 1st before I start again? Does it take me to the end of the month? Does it take me till Monday morning? Or does it take me until, tomorrow to start up again? That's the real skill of sticking to your habits. So lastly, we talked about wellness being, being able to live a meaningful and purposeful life. So I'm just going to finish up here talking a bit about this. Right. So in ACT, we talk about values. And again, ACT being a very well supported model. In ACT, values has a very specific meaning. We sometimes will say things like, I value financial freedom, but that's not what we mean by values. In ACT, we mean about how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be as a human? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to contribute to the world? How do you want to connect with people? How do you want to care about people? Right? So values are about what you want to give to life, not what you want to get from life. And so this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist who lived through the Holocaust. He was in a concentration camp, and he, wrote this book about making meaning, man's search for meaning. And he was clearly, he was with people, and he himself had lost everything. They'd lost their families, they'd lost their income, they'd lost their careers, they'd lost their businesses, right? They had lost everything. But he said it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. So this is how they found meaning, even when they had lost everything, was that there's maybe were still things that they needed to give to life. They had lost everything. Life had taken away everything from them. But there's maybe still things they needed to give to life, to contribute. And that is how they found meaning in clearly terrible, terrible circumstances. And so it's important to have hope, but a certain kind of hope, right? There's a version of hope that's, expecting a certain outcome. And that kind of hope is a bit tricky because we don't have control over the outcomes. And kind of sometimes life feels like a dumpster fire. Things don't seem to work very well. There's another version of hope, which is the belief in possibilities. So I think about this, in terms of climate change. Do I think we're going to stop climate change? Not so much. But I could have belief in possibilities. I could have belief that there are technology solutions, that there are things that we could do that might actually make things better as a result, rather than worse. I could have that kind of hope. I could have that kind of belief in possibilities. And, right now, feeling like climate change is hopeless is actually a bigger threat to tackling climate change than people who deny climate change. Because if you feel like it's hopeless, then why bother, right? So we need to have that belief in possibilities. We might not get the outcome that we wanted, but there is absolutely the possibility of things turning out better, of things showing up that we didn't even imagine. And we need to invest in that kind of hope. So finally, I just want to finish on the fact that when we think about a wellness formula, all of these things are about what you as the individual can do. But when we really think about wellness, there's a whole bunch of other things that impact that, right? So I think about how does a plant grow? There's the plant itself and how hardy the plant is and how well it's growing. But there are other things as well. What climate is the plant in? And what kind of infrastructure does it have? How much water irrigation does it get? How much sunlight does it get? Right? These are all things that impact how we can be well. And so, when we think about, there's that expression about canaries in the coal mine. And the expression, that's about the fact that they would put canaries in coal mines. And when the canaries collapsed, it meant that the oxygen levels were depleting and the coal miners should get out because they were going to run out of oxygen soon. And so it's like an early warning system. But nobody ever said that the canaries should be more resilient, right? We focus so much on what the individual should do, but there are all kinds of things that workplaces should do, that environments should do, that communities should do, that we should be doing to help people be healthier. We don't want to rely just on what the individual can or should do. We always want to empower the individual, but let's start making changes to those systems as well, right? So when we think about system level problems, right, we can increase awareness that there is a problem. And again, these are what these kinds of talks do and these kinds of organizations do, specifically around obesity and weight management, right? We want to move from me to we. So we want groups of people trying to make change. And so, never doubt that a small and thoughtful group can change the world. And indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And so we can make change. It's totally possible to have hope, and we can, work together. So make sure you stay connected to communities that are helping to do those things, just like this one. And so I'll just open it up to questions now. This is how you can find me. You can follow me on social media. You can email me at that email address. There's more information on our website if you're interested in some of the resources that we do. Again, we spend a lot of time now trying to work with workplaces to, again, change that toxic environment instead of making the canaries more resilient. And that's, again, part of our efforts to try to make, help people live more meaningful and vibrant lives.
Thank you so much, Dayna. That was absolutely amazing. It's really great to also hear in what you shared so many of the things that we've been talking about throughout this program around values and hope and having goals. I really love the idea of the ticket as your admission to a meaningful life. I feel like I'm going to print out a ticket for myself for a meaningful life and kind of paste it around, have it in the bathroom, maybe the bedroom. I really love that concept. So thank you so much for everything that you shared. I know it was a lot that, we asked you to fit in a very short period of time. But we do have some time for questions. If anyone would like to ask a question live, there was a question earlier from Rachel. So why do doctors and surgeons work after being awake for so long?
I would love to answer this question.
And we want to hear your answer too.
Terrible idea that to keep residents and physicians awake for as long as we do. It is absolutely the opposite of science. If you want to talk about an institution or a system that is making people unwell, you look at the medical system. You look at residency and medical school, because it absolutely makes people unwell. And it is terrible for the health of our health professionals as well. So that's one of those ways that our institutions are making us unwell.
I'm just going to chime in. Thank you for that. I worked in the healthcare, and so I actually do ask. I ask on behalf of myself and family, how long has the surgeon been awake before he's taking my case?
Yeah, well done. You both answered terrific, Dayna. That was really excellent. So I would agree, and of course things have changed. So so the residents don't stay long past 12 o'clock. So I would oftentimes do overnight call, and I'd stay until 4 o'clock the next day. Now you have to leave by 10 o'clock in the morning. There's a bunch of other things that are in place where the shifts are between 10 to 12-hour shifts. So it hasn't translated much to the physician side of things, particularly surgeons. It has for a lot of the medicine docs, but the surgeons, and particularly the people like neurosurgeons, sometimes in Sudbury, for instance, there are 2 neurosurgeons. So you're always on call, 1 out of every other day. And so there need to be more. So there needs to be more money, and also doctors have these egos of believing that they can do it and that they should do it, and they want the money. So if they have 4 neurosurgeons sharing the practice, that's 4. The money's divided up into 4 instead of divided up into 2. So doctors sabotage themselves for the money, for the ego, for the prestige of saying that I can do it, but it's wrong, and it's changing, and people believe in their health more, because surgeons' health and doctors' health was going south, and we now recognize that wasn't good. It wasn't good for ourselves, it wasn't good for our families. So things are changing a lot in a very short period of time. Things are going like that, which is great. So thank you for that question.
So I have one last question then. I don't see any others right now in the chat box. So I was just curious, when you had said that maybe one of the things you could do if you're finding it difficult to fall asleep is to sort of get up for maybe 20, 30 minutes, do something boring. What's an example? Because I think it's so hard for us to get bored now because we have our phones. We always have something that we can easily do that's interesting and exciting. Yeah. So what's boring?
Yeah. So certainly, there'll be individual differences, but, some people will tell you, don't touch your phone whatsoever. Put your phone outside of your bedroom. If you can do that, if that's a 90% goal for you, totally do it. For other people, it's not a 90% goal. And so you're looking for things that are not alerting, right? This is actually where apps like Calm or Headspace, they're pretty good at having sleep stories and things like that, which are sort of these very calm stories that they tell you in this kind of tone and right, to give you something to put your mind onto, like the story they're telling, but not something that's going to wake you up and, get you going. And so things like that are good things to do if you can do meditation or mindfulness. I clean if I can't fall asleep because it's a pretty mindless activity, right? So I'll put the dishes away or like things like that because it's something to do, but it's pretty boring to me. And so it's not alerting, right? If you have a book that's not a great read, right? Like this is like when you read like, journal articles and things like that. Because if it's a fascinating read, that's probably actually going to be alerting. So yeah, it does sometimes take some practice to figure out what you're going to do in those in-between times. If you're in bed and you haven't fallen asleep around 30 minutes, we, encourage you to get up and go do something else. But those are some examples of things you could be doing.
Dayna, that was fantastic. Lots of wonderful comments in the chat. We really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge and experience with us.